Gay converted man here. Well, I love logic, but sometimes, occasionally, I get formal and informal logic mixed up a little bit, so I say things that aren't exactly aligned precisely. So always take everything with a bit of a grain of salt, if you will, and should make sure that it's correct. So valid and sound. Now, I've considered valid to be the structure, which is correct in formal logic, but not necessarily informal logic. So valid refers to if the argument is laid out such that if the premises were true, then the conclusion would follow. So that's a big if. If the premises are true, then the conclusion would follow. But the premises might not be true. A sound argument is one where the premises are true, and therefore the conclusion also would be true. So, when identifying logical fallacies, this breaks from the logic being made. The attempt of making an argumentation that is both valid and sound, or rather, you could just say sound, because if it's sound, then it's automatically valid, is an undertaking where you have to make sure that each premise is actually true, not just plausibly true. So it could be valid. Lots of arguments are valid, but what matters is it sound? Is it true? So identifying fallacies is great. There's many fallacies. Appeal to fear is one. So I say, something bad will happen, or something bad could happen if you don't lock your door. So you should lock your door. Well, it's an appeal to fear. Something bad might happen, but then again, it might not. So the argument isn't necessarily uh, valid in terms of logic, but it still could be true that locking your door is a good idea. So the usefulness of identifying a fallacy is not to negate the conclusion, but to simply say, you screwed up, go fix your argument. And until you do, I'm not convinced. All men are mortal. No one disputes that, hopefully. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Classic. It's true that men are mortal. Now, is it true that Socrates is a man? We don't know for sure, but if it is true, then yes. So we'd have to verify in some way, shape, or form that Socrates is indeed a man. But assuming that it is the case, then yes, he would indeed be mortal. A sound argument is one where you could say, that's true for real. Now, in doing analysis of argumentation, we must keep in mind that arguments can appear very valid and sometimes are valid, but they're not sound. So if the premises are true, then the conclusion follows. So how do you fix it so that you avoid the whole problem of, well, I want it to be valid and sound. How do I do that if I don't know that the premises are true? That's called a hypothetical syllogism, an HS for short. So you say something like, if Daffy Duck is a duck, and if ducks are mammals, then Daffy Duck is a mammal. It's conditional on, you know, two different points. So if Daffy Duck isn't a duck, or if all ducks aren't mammals, then Daffy Duck might not be a mammal. You also want to try, if possible, to avoid superlatives. Words like all, never, e- always, uh, everywhere, nowhere, no one. Unless you absolutely could show, or it is absolutely agreed upon, that this is the case. So all humans are mortal. Yes, this is well known. Nobody disputes it. Uh, so if somebody said, "Oh, prove it," I mean, come on, really? Yeah. Uh, so yes, but when we examine, say, the classical cosmological argument, where it says all things uh, have a cause, we don't know that that's the case because that word all. We only can talk about things that we know about. We shouldn't, well, we can talk about things we don't know about, but we shouldn't do it. And so because we have introduced things of the unknown, there's bound to be some problems in the argument, least of which is that we're not really being honest with the presentation of the argument. And that's something that ideally we should strive for when making an argument. The whole point of an argument is, well, to get across the ideas in a relatively straightforward manner, and to present things in such a way that can be analyzed and shown to be the case. And it's kind of a shortcut, if you will. You know, but ultimately, it might not be that much of a shortcut, because you still have to look at the real world to find out if the dang thing is sound. So, how do you go about finding out if all ducks are mammals or not? You have to examine the real world. So, because you do that, then you find whether or not the argument is sound, which is much more important than being or just valid. Uh, but yes, I the structure of the argument also does matter, at least in terms of formal arguments. And of course, if your structure is bad, then it's going to be wonky anyways. All mammals are ducks, and Daffy Duck is a duck, and ducks are therefore all Daffy Ducks. Wait, what? I mean, it could get all messed up if you don't put it in a coherent order. All ducks are mammals. Daffy Duck is a duck. Therefore, all mammals are Daffy Ducks. I mean, it doesn't work, right? But if it was true, then the conclusion would be true. So if A, then B. If B, then C. A, therefore C. Okay, great. But we'd have to see whether A and B is true in the real world to verify if it's actually sound. And doing that is difficult at times. And identifying various fallacies helps us to avoid arguments that lead us down potentially the wrong path. Now, it might be that the answer is correct. Could very well be, for all we know. But because the argument is bad, we can't be sure about the conclusion. So we have to then hold it in judgment, or as I like to say, we have to be skeptical of it. So Um, try to make sure that your argument is sound if you can. If you're not sure, check and double check. Check with multiple people. See if, check with, good old chat GPT, run it by, you know, lots of people and see what they have to say about it. And go after that sound argument. And keep in mind that being valid is nice and in fact necessary for it to be sound in the first place. So it has to follow the flow, the structure, in other words. So when I said structure, I was technically correct, which is the best kind of correct. The structure of the argument has to be there, has to be this thing is this that is this, and therefore that, as it slots in nicely. If A then B, B then C, A then C. It doesn't, and they can strain from that pattern. Well, be careful. You might be able to do it, but probably not. So, with all that in mind, I now return to uh, losing my mind and voice in analyzing the bad argument that I was analyzing last time. Good. Yay. See you then.